Welcome to day 6, the penultimate day of the Church Checkup Challenge. And today we're talking about vision. Having a vision for where you're going. Now, there's some critics, I think, of the idea of vision and the church. They'll say we never see vision in the Bible. And, we also don't read the word Trinity in the Bible, and yet it's all throughout the Bible. Vision is, I'm not saying it's the same thing as the Trinity, but I am suggesting that the concept of having vision is all throughout the Bible. Most notably, one of my favorite, maybe not most notably, but a notable place would be with Nehemiah and the reconstruction of the walls in Jerusalem. He had a vision in his mind for what he wanted to see and why it mattered and the impact that it was going to make on the people, and a spiritual impact. Even though it was sort of a physical thing that was being built, it had a spiritual implication and a reality for the folks there. So at any rate, that's just one example. We could spend all day going through examples in the Bible of leaders that had a vision. We like to say, AJ, or I like to say that churches without vision, it's a little bit like agreeing to go on a road trip but not agreeing on where you're going to go. If you just pack up in the car and you start driving somewhere, very often you're going to have conflict in the church because people aren't exactly sure where this car is going. Mm-hmm. And so we think that we have unity because we agreed to go on a road trip, but we actually have conflict because we haven't decided or clarified exactly to where. And so vision is about describing the destination that you're going to on this journey together. The journey is determined by the Great Commission, but the destination is clarified by your vision.
Yeah, we mentioned yesterday 2 recurring themes in church revitalization or simply in church health, and that's clarity and intentionality. And until we gain clarity of what our vision is, then we might have a sense of unity, or we might have maybe a lack of conflict. You might call it unity, but what you have is a lack of conflict. Really, sometimes introducing vision to the church can cause conflict, or it can bring conflict to the surface, because up until that point, everybody was just sort of operating under either their own vision and assuming it was shared, or not even considering it at all. But again, that word intentionality comes into play. And if our church is actually truly seeking a particular outcome of our efforts, coming back to our mission of making and maturing disciples of Jesus, then we have to talk about what exactly are we all supposed to be doing together? And that's what the vision seeks to clarify. This is the least mechanical piece of any of the things that we've had so far in the challenge. The others really, they have sort of a tangible aspect to them that we can wrestle with together, and provide points of what might be pros and cons to doing something one way or another. Vision is a little bit more outside of that, and it requires us to shift our minds into, kind of a different point of view, and certainly looking outside the church at what's going on around us, especially nearest to our church. What are the needs that maybe we could address, or what are the things that we've been equipped that we could bring to the outside world that God has so graciously and sovereignly provided us with? So this is admittedly one of the more difficult aspects of church health and church revitalization. And so it might take a little bit more time, but really the best place to start from is in prayer over this. Ask the Lord to reveal to you what his vision is for your church, and do that coupled up with your leadership team, as we've encouraged you to do through each day of the challenge. So yeah, Scott, any other points that might be helpful for pastors who many times it's hard to release your mind out of kind of the week-to-week routine of what needs to be done to lead a church and to preach the word, and getting into something that's bigger than your church, into that God space that would help them to frame this up?
Well, circling back to this idea of vision being the destination where you want to go. AJ and you and I travel quite a bit for the work that we do. Sometimes we're in places like Alabama or Nebraska. Sometimes we go to a coast. Sometimes we go overseas somewhere. And when I always get excited about the overseas stuff. Just because it's fun to see some place that's very different from where we live. And that destination, we never know exactly what it's going to be like. You could look at pictures on the internet, you can just Google it or whatever, but you don't really know what it's going to be like until you get there. And yet, and so there's a little bit of a subjectivity to it, right? It's just a picture in your mind of what it would be like when you arrive at this destination.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't scare us away from doing the things we need to do to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Book the flight, make the plan, reserve the hotel room, figure out all of the different details, and start making, raise the money that we need to be able to be able to take that trip and serve those churches. So we take small baby steps in the direction of the destination, even though we don't exactly know what it's going to look like when we get there. Vision is very much that way. You can have a destination in mind, and it's okay to not fully know exactly what it's going to look like when you get there. But that shouldn't stop you from taking concrete, measurable steps in the right direction. And then when you get there, you get to experience all the fullness of it. And it very often is something unexpected and in a pleasant way.
Yeah, well, I think you sort of articulated, though, a little bit of a strategy for developing vision, and that is looking at those pictures. If you're going to be going to a German Christmas market in the middle of December, you have undoubtedly looked at a lot of pictures of that destination and the lights and the snow and everything that you just can't wait to experience. And so I think there's a way that we can sort of do this in the church as well, of imagining what's it going to be like whenever our church is thriving and whenever we're reaching people with the gospel, and imagine the events that might be happening that we're involved with in our city, in which we're seeing people, maybe at some kind of a concert situation, come forth and say, yes, I want to give my life to Christ. What would that feel like? What could that look like? And all these things might play into what the vision for your church might be. So yeah, spend some time looking for mental pictures that you could have of what the future might look like when your church is truly on mission and making a difference in the world. And that'll provide the excitement and the anticipation that people will want to be a part of and they'll want to be invested in. So again, put the time into today's audit for vision in your church, and we will see you for the final day of the Church Checkup Challenge next.